Hello, my friends. This is Daisuke, and I hope all of you are having a really nice day today. I wasn't planning on doing this, but I wanted to respond to a number of people, and I think I was very happy to receive a number of comments like this, and so I wanted just to take the opportunity to maybe send this video in general. And a lot of people have been asking me about if I wouldn't mind talking about some of the books I've been reading lately. And I want to thank you very much for your questions. You know, I think people like, please forgive me if I get the pronunciation wrong here, but there's people like Mondo Knot and Roman Skateboarding, and also people in the past have asked me about reading habits, like my friend William Clare, and also SJS Films, our dear friend SJS Films, and please check out SJS Films' channel. He is he's SJS Films, a young guy, but he is very knowledgeable, and he has a great taste in film. And also there are great channels, other YouTube channels, who are dear friends who also devote all or most of their time to talking about books on their channels. So these are people like my dear friend Bailey Walsh and her channel, and also my dear friend Memento Mori and his channel, and also Recovered Academic and his channel, and others, of course. So I'm very happy to receive these questions about my reading habits, and I'm very honored to receive them, and I didn't think people would be interested, to be perfectly honest, because I don't usually talk about it very much. I'd spoken about it maybe once, but maybe twice perhaps, but not too much. And the reason why I haven't spoken about my reading habits here necessarily is because I found it very difficult to try to integrate it into this channel. Now that's the basic reason. I'm always trying to, whenever I think about something and YouTube, my mind has automatically turned into, maybe something to do with film. And so I usually, therefore, focus my efforts and my energy into thinking about film and cinema, and trying to see how I can do the best I can to articulate what it is I feel about a certain film or a group of films, or something similar to that. Now, I'd like to think that I'm able to do that articulating, but I know that I still have a ways to go, and I know that I have many things that I still have to overcome. So there's that. So I always think perhaps that with that in mind, I always am focusing primarily on what it is I see and what it is I experience through the medium of cinema. But that is not to say that I don't read. I actually believe, personally for me, that it is very important to read, and to read as much as possible, depending on one's own schedule. Now, I know that is different for different people. I know some people have much time to devote to reading many books over the course of 1 month or 1 year, and I'm so supportive of that, and I think that's great. And that's not to suggest that people have a lot of time on their hands. No. That's just to suggest that I think people have a great way of using the limited time that they have to fit in a lot of books to read within that limited time span. And I really admire that and respect that so much. I am one of those people who, unfortunately, have a terrible time management way about doing things. And so that means that I don't I try to read as much as possible, but it's very difficult. And at the moment, I can only read. I try to read on my train rides. That's the time when I try to put in my most reading, because I don't like to just stand around doing nothing on a train ride. So I usually try to read something, or I listen to a podcast or something like that. And so that's where I try to fit in some of my reading. And also I try to do it. It's not possible every day, because it's a little bit difficult. But if I'm able to, if I have the fortitude, and I'm able to, I'll try to wake up maybe an hour or so earlier than usual, and then just spend that time to sit quietly in the main room and just read a little bit. So, but again, it's hard to focus, but I do try to get in as many books as I can. Let me just tell you what it is I'm reading now, or what it is I've read over the course of, what is it now? It's beginning of February 2019. So let me just share with you a couple titles, or not a couple, but maybe a few titles that I've read since around December 2018, something like that. And then just to share with you just generally where I'm at in terms of my reading tastes. So just finished reading through the first 3 volumes of the graphic novel by Katsuhiro Otomo called Akira. And so I'm now about to venture into the 4th volume, right? So this is the graphic novel, and so this is a very significant story for me, because Akira as a story is one that I read as a kid or as a teenager, and of course I saw the film, which is magnificent. And so this is something that I'm reading, and I think I was inspired, or I am inspired by Memento Mori, and he does a project called books and films, in other words, books that have been turned into cinema, or stories that have been adapted into film. And Akira is very interesting because the author of this and the director of the film are one and the same person. And not only that, the film, some of you may know, the film is quite different than the book series. In other words, the book series, the film was made before the book series was eventually finished. It was only halfway. He was only halfway done with the story here when he decided to make the film. And then he made the film, and it has a kind of a beginning, middle, and end, so to speak. But then after the film was released, he ended up finishing the series. And so it's almost like I'm not familiar. I don't watch the show or read the books, to be perfectly honest, except for the first one. But like Game of Thrones, it's like that. I understand that the series went up to a certain point, up to the books, and then it went beyond. So therefore, the books and the series have a slightly different. They work on different, like, parallel universes or something like that. Well, I think that's the same for Akira the film and Akira the graphic novel series. And so I think the graphic novel series is very enlightening, and there's much interplay and much confusion, perhaps, in a good way, between book and film. And so I look forward to Memento Mori's discussion about Akira. So in preparation for that wonderful discussion from him, I'm reading that series and slowly but surely going through those. And also, I'm a big fan of, I think my taste in books is quite, maybe some might say boring. If I were to say that, The Great Gatsby is my favorite, or one of my favorite books in English. And so I've never read This Side of Paradise, and I always thought it was a great oversight on my part. And so I read this, and this was the last thing I read one of the last things I read in 2018. And so, I'm a great admirer of F. Scott Fitzgerald's writing. I think if there's anyone that I love in terms of language that is, how should I put it? It's not flowery, it's not overly poetic, it's and it's not there. There's no. It doesn't have a sense of an obvious style. It just, how should I put it? It just feels right. His language feels like it's like a lovely glove that fits on your hand, and it feels soft, and it's just. His writing is just so impeccable. So anyway, this was a great thing for me because I haven't read This Side of Paradise, so I was very happy to do so. And I was then going over my holiday, my New Year's holiday. I was just going over this. And I've read this many times, but I brought this with me because I wanted just to revisit this in terms of I didn't reread the entire thing, but I read maybe about half of it in excerpts, because Embracing Defeat, this is, what is it? Embracing Defeat, Japan in the Wake of World War II by John Dower. And so this is quite a good book for me, and it's one where we talk about a very significant part of Japanese history, which is post-war Japan, and the societal implications that came with the occupation and what happened after the occupation. So this is very important for me, and this is one that I have a close connection with. Although I know my generation is different, this is one that is very important to me, and I really admire John Dower's writing here in English. I think this is probably the premier work in English on this particular field of history. And speaking of history, I have this, which is, I've read this once through some months back actually, but now I'm going back and revisiting it and trying to make it clear in my mind, just to make sure I have all the details right. I don't have them all down yet, but this is a book called Under the Shadow of the Rising Sun, Japan and the Jews During the Holocaust Era by Meron Medzini, yes. And so, sorry about the glare here, there we go. And so, I'm not a history student of Holocaust studies, and I'm not a student, and I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to matters of Holocaust studies. And I'm not actually a great student of World War II history, to be perfectly honest, although I do know the general history of World War II. I'm not for instance, I'm not a military history student, and I'm not a scholar of that nature. I know, all the big famous battles that one should study in general history class, but I don't usually study any kind of military history or war history or anything like that. And I'm certainly not a student of Holocaust studies. However, I am still of the opinion that my discussion that I did some months back on the film Showa was one that I thought was very important for me, and so I am not a student of Holocaust studies, but I think it's very important to know as much as possible, if you get my drift. Therefore, I was getting a lot of stuff that I could, that was provided through the materials that were prepared in relation to the film Showa. So that was very helpful for me in trying to get a better appreciation of what that work is all about. But I was also very concerned, actually, because I wanted to be sure that I had my own appreciation of, or I had a better appreciation of Japan and its position on with respect to the Holocaust, because of course we have the idea that Japan was part of the Axis alliance, and so during World War II, and so what that means in terms of its alliance to Nazi Germany at the time during World War II. And so I needed to be sure that I was appreciative, or had a better sense of trying to appreciate where Japan was in terms of its approach to the Holocaust. And so I mean, when I say Japan, I mean the government of Japan during the war, during its approach to the Holocaust. This book is, I think, one way of trying to figure that stuff out, in English anyway. And so I thought this was a very important one to read for me. So yes, Under the Shadow of the Rising Sun. And also there's this, which is, I don't want to talk too much about it, but there's Yukio Mishima. Now, Yukio Mishima is a very interesting writer, in my view. I've said this before, and I say it again. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Mishima's writings, but I do like, I do think it's important to read as much as possible, and especially in the context of trying to appreciate who he was. And he was a very complicated figure. I think there are some aspects about his life, at least as far as I understand it to be, based on what I've read, which are quite difficult for me to get my head around sometimes. There's the great book, Confessions of a Mask, which I must admit, it's a very short work. If you haven't read it, you should. But there are some moments in that book where I am perplexed beyond belief. And I don't mean that as a criticism, but I think that there is so much depth there that I can't quite get my head around it because I'm not that intellectually capable. But I do. There are other works where I think I do have some issues with his works. I have issues with getting to the heart of what he was writing about, and so I don't think he's a writer that I necessarily really admire. But I have read this one in Japanese because Kyoko's House, or Kyoko no Ie, as it's known in Japanese, published first, let me see here, in 1959. This is one that was part of the omnibus, or not the omnibus film. What is kind of an omnibus film? Mishima, Life in 4 Chapters, directed by Paul Schrader in 1985, excuse me. And one of the episodes in that film was an excerpt of the work Kyoko's House. Now, I think originally Paul Schrader was planning to do an excerpt on the book Forbidden Colors, but I think he was forbidden from doing that from the rights holder of the Yukio Mishima estate, the wife of Yukio Mishima. And so I think he then decided to do an excerpt from Kyoko's House, which was a very interesting one. And this book, I don't think, has been officially published in English, which is, I think, due to its, again, I think there's a purposeful reason why it hasn't been published into English. But I don't know the details necessarily, but I think it's an interesting work. It's not one that has converted me into becoming a Yukio Mishima writings fan, bona fide fan necessarily, but I do see its merit. Oh gosh, this video is going long, I'm so sorry. So let me just go very quickly into things and then I'll let you go. Last December I was into a James Ivory Ismail Merchant Merchant Ivory, and so I was trying to get into some of the other earlier films like Shakespeare Walla and Bombay Talkie and the like, and so part of that journey has meant that I've tried to get into some of the more background and the making of. So this is James Ivory in Conversation, How Merchant Ivory Makes Its Movies, Robert Emmett Long. And so this is James Ivory basically in conversation with the author. He's talking about Ruth Prowler Jabala, and he's talking about Ismail Merchant, and of course he's talking about each of the films. And so this is very interesting. It's a glimpse into what James Ivory is thinking about, the history behind some of the history behind the films that he directed. And so this is very helpful if you are into Merchant Ivory films and trying to get into more of the history. So James Ivory in Conversation. very interesting. Oh, very actually, it's long. It seems long. It's over 300 pages, but it actually goes by very quickly. So it's highly recommended. You can get it used, I think, from Amazon very easily. So at a very cheap price, I think. So, and then just to continue on to that, I had to revisit this book because E.M. Forster is someone that I was so enamored with when I was in college. And I never took a course on E.M. Forster in college, and I really should have. That's one of my great regrets, is never taking a course on E.M. Forster. I would have loved to have done that, but I did read a lot of E.M. Forster because my college had a really good library, and Morris was, I think, the one that really, Morris and Howard's End are the ones that stick with me the most, and Morris in particular is quite a devastating and moving work, and I revisited it because there was some talk about the film Morris that I was engaged with, and I just so inspired by that I had to read this again. And I read it again, and I'm just it is so devastating in its tenderness, if you know what I mean. And so I find it to be very, very moving. A moving work, and it's so frustrating, and it angers me a lot too, and I think that's what it's supposed to do. So yes, Morris by E.M. Forster. And let's see, I don't want to keep you, but the ones that the one I'm reading now is, I'm reading this very quickly. I think I'll try to finish this soon, but it's the one, I've read this before many times, but I'm reading Dr. No by Ian Fleming, and I'm doing this for a certain project to do with James Bond. Hopefully, keep a lookout for further updates on that. And I just got this, and so I'm not going to focus on this too much because I haven't read it. I'm ashamed to admit that I haven't read this, but this is Thackeray's Barry Lyndon. So at last I got my hands on Barry Lyndon. So I have never read this, so I think I'm going to start on Monday and try to go through it. I don't know how successful I'll be in getting into it because I'll probably be spending my time on the train reading Barry Lyndon. So if you've read this, please let me know what you think of it, because I want to try to get as much out of it as possible. Yes, so gosh, I hope I can finish this soon. But it is, yes, it seems like it will be one that I probably will spend much time on, because it might be something that will take me a little bit of time to try to get into until I get used to the rhythms of the writing, but and the places, because I always have to check the annotation notes, the explanatory notes, and so that always makes me, you know how it is, you have to check the notes and then you go back to the work and you start again, and you kind of try to get the flow, but then you forgot something, so you have to go back again. So that'll be a little bit, that'll break the flow of my reading. I'll try not to do that as much as possible, maybe read the notes beforehand perhaps. But anyway, I'll see how far I get through Barry Lyndon, and so that will be my project, I think, for this week, or starting this week anyway. I don't think I'll be able to finish it within 1 week. I think it'll take much more than that, but it should be very interesting. So yes, so that's what my general state of mind is when it comes to reading. And so as I say, I think it's very important to do as much reading as possible, at least from my point of view. I don't necessarily, please don't get me wrong. I don't at all say that everyone should read as much as possible. No. I don't think that at all. I think essentially, everyone has his or her own life, and I think that everyone has his or her own way of absorbing information and absorbing inspiration and becoming inspired through whatever means, whether it's through art, or whether it's through work, or whether it's through everyday life, or whether it's through politics, or whether it's through maybe eating or drinking or engaging with family and friends, or that sort of thing. So I understand that it's just one component of that possibility, the range of possibilities. So for me personally, however, I think I always I'm always amazed, well, not amazed. It's a given in life. It's the ultimate premise that I have. That everything I think I know always reminds me about the infinite vast expanse of things that I don't know, and so I'm just so embarrassed all the time and realizing how little I know indeed. So I think I'm just trying to get as much out of my time before I shuffle off this mortal coil, as it were. So I don't, as I say, and sorry about the ramble here, but one other thing is the question that I have from, I think it's William Clare, my dear friend William Clare, who asked me a great question about books and the films, and do I read the books first and then do I watch the films? That is a very interesting question. And so, William, if you don't mind, I would like to address that in a separate video, because it has its own, I have my own particular take on it, as maybe you know, based on my brief comment that I gave you. But I'd like to talk about that further, and maybe you and others might have some thoughts about that. So I'll try to address that in a separate video if you don't mind. But in any event, that was just a little taste of what it is, where my mind is at in terms of reading. But I hope that was interesting to you. Again, I apologize if I haven't done this on a regular basis, but it's just been difficult to try to integrate it into this channel. But if you are interested, I don't know, I don't know how interesting it is for people to know what it is I'm reading, because maybe my tastes are not so exciting to you. But if you are interested, let me know, and if there is enough interest, maybe I can do this, I don't know, maybe once a month or something. And I should say also that I am on Goodreads, I think, but to be perfectly honest, I don't. I think that's a perfectly fine site, and I love people doing that sort of thing. I think that's great, but it's just, for me personally, it's something that I don't quite know how to get into and engage with fully, because I think there's so much stuff like online, and you have to put in a login and password and do this and do that and check your app or something. So I find that my mind, I can't quite keep up. So I'm very embarrassed, and I've mentioned this before, but I still don't know exactly what Twitter is. So I apologize for my friends maybe who are on Goodreads and I don't have any activity there. It's just, I just don't know how to engage with it. Maybe one of these days I'll try to engage with it more, but again, it's just my own lack of sophistication, perhaps. My own lack of knowledge of the technology has maybe not enabled me to get into it as much as I really should. So, but that's just the only reason. So my apologies for people who are maybe trying to reach me through Goodreads. I don't know. I don't think there's anyone out there actually, but in case you are out there. Anyway, my friends, let me leave it at that. So thank you very much for your time and patience. I apologize for the length of this video, and I hope you are well. And please keep on reading a lot of great books. Until we meet again, my friends. Cheers.